Hello and welcome to CTERA's training video for setup and configuration for the first time of a CTERA Edge gateway. So let's go ahead and see how it's done. So connecting for the first time to a gateway through the web UI, you're presented with a welcome screen asking you to choose username and password for the admin user. So let's go ahead and set a password and email address. Upon first-time connection, you're presented with a storage setup wizard. So here, steps are obvious. We can set the host name of the gateway. In this case, we are using a CTERA virtual gateway. Virtual and physical gateways are available. So this vGateway, this virtual gateway, we'll set the host name to, for example, vgateway/demo. Importantly, to have beforehand is the portal address, the CTERA portal address, where the device will be connecting to for backup or for syncing purposes, and also for remote management. In this case, we'll be using my demo cloud, named cloud.cetera.me. And obviously, because we're connecting to authenticated platform, we need a username and password. So here I have it. Demo account Rick and his password. Now, because we're also connecting using a virtual gateway as opposed to a physical gateway where the license is embedded, we have an additional step here required to set the license type of the virtual gateway. So in this case, for demo purposes, I will be selecting EV16, which allows me to have 16 terabytes worth of hot data, local data on the device, and with 8 gigabytes of RAM for performance purposes. Also important to understand before the configuration of the gateway is the type of mode that we need, that we would like the gateway to work in. Very simple. There are 3 modes. Most simple of which is the cloud backup, which performs a periodic backup of data, of all the data in your NAS, in your CTERA gateway. As opposed to sync or caching, that the syncing, the bidirectional syncing of data or archiving of data into the cloud is continuous. Now, the difference between caching and sync is also quite important and very relevant in the setup process. Caching of data enables the gateway to leverage storage on the portal and free up local storage on the NAS device, on the CTERA gateway. So consider caching as enabling your gateway as a bottomless storage device. So you have, for example, your 16 terabytes worth of local storage device, local storage capacity, but you're connected to a CTERA portal that's leveraging object storage. And object storage, let's say you have hundreds or even petabytes worth of data capacity. A CTERA gateway can leverage that by caching or archiving data off of the gateway into the CTERA portal, effectively giving you an unlimited amount of local storage capacity on the gateway. This is often referred to as hot or cold data. The hot data remains on the gateway as real files. The cold data is archived into the CTERA portal, but more importantly, the files, the data that is archived, that really is hosted in the cloud platform, is still available to the user locally, but it's identified as a stub file, a file which is consuming 1K of local storage capacity on the gateway, and this file could be gigabytes or terabytes worth of data into the cloud. Now, caching and sync have the same basic concept of continuously syncing any new data from the gateway into the cloud, or vice versa, any data which has been shared with the gateway in a global file system can be synced down onto the gateway automatically. Now, the main difference between caching and sync is caching leverages this archiving and stubbing technology as opposed to sync, where the device is continuously syncing on a one-to-one basis files and folders from the portal or from the gateway, meaning that it does not leverage archiving or caching of data. So we'll be using caching mode for this demo. The storage setup wizard recognizes that there is a disk attached to my virtual gateway, allowing me to use that disk. And it's also proposing the actions for formatting the volume and setting it as the correct file format, file system format. So here we can see that's automatically adding a volume of 20 gigabytes, which is a drive I have attached to my virtual gateway, and the volume we formatted at XFS. This is the only supported file system type for a caching gateway. Okay, so here we'll click next. And also, you have an option here to join an Active Directory domain. For the purposes of this demo, we will not. We'll be using local users, but also take note that this is possible. So let's just skip that step, and our device has been set up as a caching gateway. Now, what we can do as the first steps is just verify that the volume, for example, has been created correctly. So here we can go into storage. Now we have two options in storage. We have arrays and volumes. Obviously for arrays, this is more relevant for physical devices, as you have physical drives, and you can create an array of RAID arrays using your physical drives. Now, because this is a virtual gateway, obviously the data protection, the drive protection is done on the back end through the shared storage, which is connected to your ESX, your KVM, your Hyper-V, or your private cloud of your choice. And in this case, obviously, we'll just be using a volume, so I can see that the volume has been created, it's online, it's ready, and it's using XFS. Excellent. So next steps in creating and setting up the caching gateway. So here we can just go to main and click on home. And this is just like an easy dashboard where we have access to all the relevant configuration menus that we also have here on the left-hand panel. What we want to do is go to Cloud Drive for the Cloud Drive setup. You can see that the caching gateway has been automatically configured. It's suspended for the time being. We have one more configuration step to do in our case for this demo, because for this demo, we are using ACL volumes and ACL shares. And this is probably relevant for the majority of your installations as well and your migrations, because we're moving from legacy systems, legacy NAS or legacy Windows file servers that have been enforcing a hierarchical ACL permission setup. And through Windows or through your NAS server and CTERA, we can obviously work with that, migrate, and enforce these file permissions like for like. So here, if we go into share, we can see that there are two network shares at the moment, and we need to enable the cloud share for the cloud network share to be created. So here we go into Cloud Drive, we clicked unsuspend. You'll see that there are no folders were selected for sync. And also they'll have this error message that Windows ACLs cannot be synchronized to this device, because we have Windows ACLs on the portal that need to be synced down onto the caching gateway. This is very easily remediated. So here we go into share. And now when we click on shares, we see there's a new volume called cloud. And this is your default sync location for all your folders and files. So we just click on cloud. And the important part here is just to change the Windows file sharing authentication or permission protocol to, well, from local users, from authenticated users, to Windows ACL emulation mode. Okay, this enables us to work in an ACL environment. So we click next, 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 and finish. And now if we go back into Cloud Drive, which is our syncing or caching menu, you'll see that the Windows ACL will be remediated, and we can see now that all files and folders have been cached down and synced to the local device. If I just click on settings here, I can set the sync throughput. I can also change, if required, the operation mode that we set in the storage wizard, the first time setup wizard, from classic, which is the backup, syncing and caching. Just one thing which I think is important to understand is here, obviously we see the full user list that this gateway has access to. And from the portal, obviously these are portal users. And we can see we have a user here called Rick. Now, automatically, all these files are being cached onto the gateway. Now, if you remember, the difference between syncing and caching was that files coming from the portal onto the gateway will be available as a cached or as a stubbed file, but will not necessarily be downloaded and consume storage on the local device. Now, there will be cases where you need offline access to data, or what we call pinned files or pinned folders, and you can pin a file or pin a folder onto the gateway just by simply selecting that folder from the user. It could be a share, or it could be a personal folder from a user. And in this case, we have a folder here called pinned. And if I just click save, that will automatically download the files, those 71 files from that pinned folder onto the device, okay? As opposed to files being downloaded on access, which is how caching generally works. Let's just take a quick overview of the options that we have available as an admin. So if we click on this device, we see and just review the configuration that we'd already done in the setup wizard, the amount of storage, the license, the physical, the device name of the user, the host name, physical location. So here we can set this to, for example, Madrid. Dashboard. This very simple overview of the physical devices, volumes, and the latest relevant events for the admin. And activity will just be more relevant when, I guess, troubleshooting performance issues. If you see that there's lots of disk activity, lots of CPU, perhaps it's time to increase RAM or improve the CPU or drive speed. Local backup and cloud backup will not be covered in this demo, as it is not relevant to caching gateway setup. Here, what I'd like to show you in users is how to add, for example, a local user. Now, we'll see how to add the gateway into an Active Directory domain. But here, for example, we can just add a local user, Rick. Full name, email address, and UID is optional and can be set. So here, we can easily add a local user, and the same applies to groups. Okay. Now in shares, one thing I would like to cover, and it's also quite important and relevant whenever you are migrating from a standard or a classic file server environment into CTERA, a cloud-enabled solution. And this is in regard to nested shares. So here we can actually play around with nested shares and configure them to our liking. Now, we have our default sync location, which is called cloud, but we can also create a new network share. So here I can click new share, and I will browse to that pin folder, which I pinned from Rick Sanchez. So here I'm actually selecting a network SharePoint directly to this pinned file, as opposed to having to navigate to cloud, users, Rick, pinned. So here we can name the network share. So let's just call this Rick pinned. And we can also set the type of share that we want to create. Now we're wanting to work also in a Windows ACL emulation mode, and also the type of file sharing protocols that we want to have active for the share. we want to use NFS, the default user permissions for that network share, and next. So here we can actually see we have a new network share that has been internally routed to cloud users Rick Sanchez pinned. Okay, so this is how to create a nested share on the CTERA gateway. So let's look in Windows file sharing. Windows file sharing allows us to set the Active Directory domain and some Windows file sharing options. An important note also for admin users and also for end users is the fact that Windows and CTERA are integrated in previous versions mode, meaning that I can right-click on a file, select properties, and I can go into the files or folders previous versions. That includes versions and also deleted files. And here we can set it to be activated or not. Because obviously sometimes we're working or moving from legacy systems, we need to, and we have support for other type of file service protocols, FTP, TFTP, rsync, AFP, and NFS. The storage we already covered. Arrays obviously be relevant for physical gateways, volumes for virtuals, and also for physicals once the arrays have been created. Snapshots is more relevant when we're working in a backup solution, because with the CTERA sync or caching solution, files are constantly being versioned, and those versions, as I mentioned, are available through the right-click Windows previous versions option, so no need to create physical snapshots on the gateway. The CTERA technology and the CTERA portal take care of that. And for the admin, important to understand where and what logs are available. So here we have a log viewer, and you can see that there are already some logs in here. For example, the device startup is connected to a network. This network is connected through DHCP, so I was provided an automatic IP address. A drive was configured and it was connected to the portal. We have different types of log topics as well. Local backup, cloud backup. Cloud sync will be interesting because cloud sync is all the file movements to and from the gateway. Now remember, this gateway is constantly syncing bidirectionally, meaning files being created on the gateway are synced automatically to the portal. And the same applies if a gateway is part of a global file system. New files added to that global file system will automatically be synced onto the gateway. And here we can just see a very simplistic view of all the different types of files, all the different types of folders that have been synced or updated on the gateway. Okay, this same applies to new files, to file edits, or even to file deletion. Event log for access, event log for auditing. So all the new users created, shares created, and first-time setups are registered. In log settings, we can set the amount of the retention time for logs, where they are stored, and the type of log level. Errors, every single file, or no logs at all. Also important to note that the gateway, as well as the CTERA portal, can output all the logs onto a syslog server. We also have the possibility to save SMB audit logs that is configured from this menu. The alerts that we have available can be sent over email, and basically, you know, the typical alerts that we'd expect as an admin: if there's no cloud connectivity, if there's no successful sync, if the storage is near full capacity, and obviously being able to receive these emails, an email server must be set up through this menu. Cloud services, once it has been set up, really does not require more attention. We set that up through the first-time connection wizard, and basically just gives you an overview of the connectivity to the cloud and all the services that are available to the gateway. Remote access by default is on, recommended, as this allows remote users or remote admins to remotely configure and connect to a gateway through the CTERA portal. This is obviously ideal not just for configuration, but also for troubleshooting or for helping local admins or local users access or configure the gateway. And in the system, important menus, obviously the firmware. In a typical installation, all the firmware and upgrades are managed from the CTERA portal. The network can be configured from the network settings. A couple of things would just like to highlight is this diagnostics tools. So should you be having any network issues on the gateway, this should probably be your go-to point. So you can have pings from the gateway, DNS lookup tracer routes, TCP connect, and also wake tools. SNMP is available, configuration tools. What I'd like to highlight from this menu is not just the fact that you can import and export configuration settings for the gateway, but more importantly is how to manage the support report. Now, in a typical scenario, if you're having any difficulties configuring or using the CTERA gateway and a support case is required, here you're definitely recommended to download a support report. And what this does is collect all the logs that we viewed in the menu, and also it has access to more system embedded logs that would require CLI and access, and packages it in a single folder. And this folder is the ideal first step for troubleshooting a device. If you open a case with CTERA networks, this will probably be the first action item that the support team would recommend. Okay, so just in order to save that step, we would definitely recommend that you download and submit a support report should you need to contact CTERA support. And lastly, regional settings, self-explanatory. Here you'd set obviously date and time and the configuration interface. So thank you. This is the conclusion of the first-time admin setup for the CTERA gateway. There are more gateways available. There are more demos available for end user and also for portal admin and end user access to the portal. Should you require access to the videos, please contact your local CTERA representative. Thank you for watching this video. Hope it's been useful, and have a nice day.